So that's some of the things that I do. My time is valuable. And so when I do a project, I want to put a product on there that I can do it quickly, I can do it effectively, and that I will get durability out of that product for years to come.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Rick Watson, Director of Product Information and Technical Services for Sherwin-Williams. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Rick Watson, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Well, thank you for having me, Pat, and it's a pleasure to be on your show.
We were just talking before the show. The last time we ran into each other was at the Home Builder Show in Las Vegas. And as you pointed out, the world has changed a lot since then.
Things have changed, as I said, just a little bit since then. But, what a great show. I love when you guys come in and talk to us about our new products and things like that. It's an exciting show. I really love to do that show. Of course, I'm not in my white coat today, so sorry about that.
We should explain that you wear a lab coat when you're talking to folks at the Builder Show.
Yes, I do. I am the Dr. Watson, if you will, of paint. So
are you able to work from home, or are you going into the office? What's going on with your work life?
Well, I'm actually, as you can see, I'm in my office. I've been back in my office for, 2-3 weeks, up to a month or so. So we do have some people still doing their jobs from home quite effectively. And we have a lot of number of folks still are coming actually down to the office as well. So
where is your office located? Where is your office?
Our office?
Yes.
Downtown Cleveland,
okay.
Ohio.
Can you tell me what exactly it is you do for Sherwin-Williams? And have you been there a long time? And have you worked for other paint companies?
Well, my boss kind of wonders what I do as well, but no, that's just a joke. So what the Director of Product Information and Technical Services. So what we do in my office is a number of things. One, we help bring new products to life, and you're aware of the new products that we introduced at IBIS. So what we do is we help commercialize those products, from data pages, information, from labels that you see on those cans, to bringing that product to life in a number of our systems. We create and we also maintain all of that information over our existing stores' product portfolio. So we also have under my area, if you will, we also have what's called a product hotline. And we have about 10 agents that actually take a lot of calls from our stores and all of our field people when they have questions about product, or say you would call in, you're a store or something, you would call in and need some help on a specific specification on how to paint this piece of aluminum or whatever it may be. We have agents that will actually take care of that as well.
How do you train those people? They must have to know a ton of stuff.
Well, yes, yeah. Typically, what we talk about is when you're in the field, you kind of get trained really quick in the field. Put it that way. You're dealing with contractors coming in a lot, and they're asking all these questions. So it's kind of like repetition. So if you've been out in the field 10 plus years, you've seen a lot. So all of our agents, roughly 20, I think it was around 22 years of service with Sherwin-Williams on average. So we have some agents that are 35 years in with Sherwin-Williams. I have 33 years in with Sherwin-Williams. So, it's a lot of knowledge that you gain over a period of time working on the phones or in the stores as well.
Did you start in a paint store or as a painter, or are you a chemist? What's your background? How does one become this person?
Well, actually, in order to get myself through college, a friend of mine and I started a little paint company, painting houses in the summer. And when we'd come home from school and the breaks, we would go to houses and paint inside or outside, whatever. And it just so happened one day there was a career fair at Ball State University where I went to school. Sherwin-Williams was there, and I was a little bit cocky. I said, "Hey, I used your paint." And the manager there said, "Well, why don't you come and interview?" And I said, "Okay, I will." So, long story short, I interviewed, started as a management training person, and went to a commercial store in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And from there, I worked as the operations manager for a few months and then became a sales rep. And from sales rep, I did that greatest job in the company. I loved being a sales rep, going out, talking with contractors, getting my hands dirty, getting clothes dirty, you name it. Great job. But I wanted to change, so I went into managing a store. And then from a store, went to opening up a brand new store, and then realized, that's a lot of lifting. My ankles and my knees, everything hurts. So I said maybe I should use my head and my mouth. And then came to Cleveland and worked in our product hotline for a number of years, and then just basically progressed up into the director of product information.
So your only employer has been Sherwin-Williams this entire time since you got out of college?
Yes.
Wow, that is pretty
Yes.
cool.
I'm one of those. I'm kind of one of those old school guys that I say Uncle Sherwin, but Sherwin-Williams gave me the opportunity. They've taken care of me and my family. Love the company, and I couldn't see it any other way. It's just that love of the company, and they take care of their people. Like I said, they've taken care of me and my family. I just love it.
That's cool. That's really cool. So you got to watch?
Actually, I have two different watches. I'll pat myself on the back. I actually won 5 different president's trips. So I've taken some president's trips when I was in the field for sales excellence. And so I've got the watches and the rings, yeah.
That's really cool. What are the most significant changes in residential paints and coatings that you've seen in your long career?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is kind of a transformation going from the the old oil solvent based products to water based products, and then taking that same water based product and still generating a water based product, but water based products that are less than 50 grams per liter and or zero VOC grams per liter, all the while keeping that durability that you were used to in the old oil-based products. As a matter of fact, even some of those water-based products that we have today, majority of them, are better. They don't yellow like the old oil bases. The oil base used to get really hard and they'd start cracking. They'd lose their color. They would chalk. Well, the technology, again, has come a long way from those oil-based products all the way now to our good water-based acrylics and things like that. So,
what do you think is the future? What can we expect coming forward?
well, again, I still say, looking at those water-based type products, again, less than 50 grams per liter, but modifications. And what I mean by that is, so, alkyds were alkyds, they were suspended in solvents. Now, you can still get that alkyd type resin that's modified with an acrylic, or that alkyd that's modified with a urethane resin. So you've got a urethane alkyd resin suspended in water, all the while it being less than 50 grams per liter. So, that's something that you and I talked about at IBIZ was the emerald urethane trim enamel. If you remember, it was on the inside of the blue wall and everything. That is a urethane alkyd enamel, less than 50 grams per liter, suspended in water, and very hard, very durable, scratch resistant. Awesome, awesome product. Just, I'd say it beats the living daylights out of any old oil-based products. And that's the kind of technology that you're seeing coming forth nowadays.
That's incredible. I've heard it said, and it maybe was you, that paint preparation is more important than actual painting. Is that true? And how can one be sure they've adequately prepared the surface for a coat of paint?
You played right into my hand on that one.
I think you and I might have had this conversation in the past.
We probably did. Every time I do an interview or if we talk, writing up anything, any specification, anything like that, the first really thing out of my mouth is prep. You are so right. Prep is key. Here's the problem. Here's what people do. They tend to look at a project and they go, okay, well, I need to sand this or I need to scrape this, and they just start sanding and scraping right away. And you and I talked about this. Well, if you go in and you've got a surface and you're taking your sandpaper and you're sanding it, if there's dirt, grease, grime, or contaminants on that surface, all you're doing is taking this sandpaper and grinding that dirt, grease, and grime deeper into the pore of that paint film. So now, as you can see, kind of you get that grease into the pore, but you never really did take that off the surface. So typically, the preparation that I tell people is clean, dry, dull, and sound. First step, a good cleaner degreaser to a little bit of water, obviously, in a rag, and wash those substrates down to make sure you're getting any dirt, grease, grime, or contaminant off that wall.
Can I interrupt you 1 second?
Sure.
So companies sell these wipes, much like this wipes that we use now to sanitize thing, right? And they're like a soapy rag that comes in a plastic tube, and it comes off and like dispenses like diaper wipes, right?
Kind of like yes.
Do those work? Is that an adequate thing to be using to clean, as you described earlier?
It would be if that product is a good emulsifying agent. And what I mean by that is you've heard the advertisements. I'm not going to say the dishwasher soap, but it takes grease out of the way.
I love that stuff. Dawn.
You said it, I
Yeah.
did. But you are correct. If you think about it, and it does. I mean, you throw that little bit of that in a pan that's grease, and you can see the grease just
It's great product.
It's emulsifying, basically. So what you're trying to do is take those same type of wipes and that have a little bit of this dishwasher soap, if you will, or emulsifying agent, and wipe and clean that off. Now, here's the key to that. So if you're wiping a little area, that's great. But if you use that one wipe over a 3,000 square foot area, not so good, because all you're doing is continually wiping. But
do you have to rinse the soap off, though? I mean, is that part of it?
Yeah, typically, as you're cleaning, you're going in and you're continually rinsing out your rag and you're going down. Then what I say is throw that out, have a new rag, a damp rag. Now, I'm not talking wet, but just a damp rag, and then wipe it down to make sure that you're not leaving any of that soap suds on the surface. Then you can come in and do your sanding and scraping and so forth. But, before we go too far on that, there is a warning. And that warning is about removal of old paint by sanding, scraping, or other means that may generate lead dust.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not aware of what paint is on your walls, or if your house was built prior to 1978, I would suggest, heed that warning. It's on all cans, it's on all labels, it's on all data pages. If you need to find out more, you can call the National Lead Center at 1-800-424 lead. So that will help go through that. But yeah, again, prep, clean, dry, sound. You can't go wrong if you do the prep. Clean, dry, dull, and sound.
What do you mean by dull and sound?
Well, clean, obviously, we talked about the emulsifying agent. Dull, once you're done with that part of it, if you need to come back in and give it a scuff sanding, if you got a really high gloss surface and you would like to come in and give it a good scuff sanding, just, again, it's not sitting there doing this on one area. It's just one of these hit and miss type things. Sound is making sure that, there's not any holes in drywall, or wood is rotten, or, you've got some really, really corrosion on some steel, things like that. See-throughs and put-throughs and things like that. You just need to take care of that substrate prior to priming or painting.
And dull? is
Dull
sanding. And
yeah, scuff sanding, scraping.
but if you're
In
painting
some
certain
cases,
finishes, you don't have to do that. Is that a fair statement?
there are finishes that you don't have to do that. That's correct. As a matter of fact, I've been painting my basement walls that had a gloss oil-based paint on them. I cleaned it up. I practice what I preach. So I actually, took a good soap, cleaned the walls off. I did not sand. Um, and I decided, well, I'm going to try. I put a little sample of our emerald interior matte on the decorative brick, put that on there, and waited 24 hours and came back in. I did the old scratch test, which is not a really good test, but did the scratch test anyway. And wow, I was thoroughly impressed. The adhesion of that product is outstanding. So, and I was happy that I didn't have to come in and sand any walls or use any type of bonding primer. So, boom, I went over top of that, and looks like $1,000,000.
Is there a more legitimate adhesion test that contractors could do to make sure their products are going to stick on a surface?
There is. There's, typically what we're going to talk about is using a what's called a crosshatch adhesion test, and there's an X test that you can take a razor knife and do an X, and then take a piece of regular tape, like masking tape, not duct tape, but regular masking
Yeah.
tape, and put on there and then peel off. And if the majority of that X is peeling off, then you don't have very good adhesion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. The other way is doing like a tic-tac-toe board with the knife. 3 or 4 lines this way, 3 or 4 lines horizontally, taking that same piece of tape, putting it on there, and pulling. So in each of those squares, there is a number like maybe 10% or less. Then you've got great adhesion. 15. Okay, now you're starting to get a little bit of questioning there. But if in those squares you're 25 or better as far as being able to pull it
Mm-hmm.
off, you don't have very good adhesion.
Is it reasonable to expect that adhesion would get better, or there are some conditions where adhesion would get worse over time?
Typically, in latex paints and things like that, the longer you wait, the potential better the adhesion you may see. I just waited 24 hours in my basement. Figured that would be sufficient enough. When you're looking at like 100% acrylics, for example, we have some pro-industrial DTM acrylics, direct to metals. Those are 100% acrylic, and it takes them a little bit longer to dry and to cure and to actually really adhere to the best, that it's supposed to. Typically, on something like that, 100% acrylics will tell you about 7 days. Put your sample on, wait about 7 days, and then come in and do a test. So the longer in that period, yes. If you test it in 24 hours, it may look pretty good, but you may also notice that it starts peeling up in a sheet, and that's what acrylics do. They've got all these little particles, and then all of a sudden, as they dry, they start to cure, and they start forming that film. And if you get on it too soon, again, you can pull it off like a big sheet. So yeah, in that case, the longer you wait, the better.
Are there products that lose their adhesion over time? I mean, obviously there are other factors, weathering and what have you, that would cause paints to not stick. But are there some coatings that, by their very nature, will lose their adhesive qualities over time?
Yeah, as we talked earlier about alkyds, those old solvent-based alkyds, if you looked at it, the longer they started to dry and to cure, the brittle, more brittle they got. And that would be the problem, is at some point in time, it got to a point where it was so brittle it started cracking, and from that cracking, then it would start losing adhesion and peel off in flakes. So yeah, I mean, there are some in that case.
This brings me to my next point. I hear old-time painters and carpenters say that paint isn't as good as it used to be since the removal of lead and the switch to mostly water-based products. Is that true? Do they have a point?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of straddling the fence here, Pat, because I'm one of those old school guys. I've 35 plus years at least doing painting. Um, However, I tell you what, the technologies that we have today are pretty impressive when it comes to water-based type coatings. We talked about modifying an alkyd with an acrylic. We talked about modifying that same alkyd with a urethane. So, if old school guys, 40 plus years, if they haven't used some of these new acrylic alkyds and urethane alkyds that are water based, I think they're missing the boat. I really do. Now, there are some primers. There are some primers that I'm really still old school. We've come a long way with water-based type primers as far as blocking and stain
Can you tell folks
resistance.
briefly what those things are, blocking and stain resistance?
Okay. Well, blocking is to make sure that, if you have a stain on the substrate, on a piece of drywall, let's say, if you have a stain on there, that when you put that primer on top of that, that stain does not bleed through.
Mm.
So that's bleeding and kind of blocking those stains out. So there are products that we have in the water-based side that help do that. But there are still these severe cases of like tannins, and tannin is a bleed from cedars and redwoods and things like that. That will bleed through the wood if you use a latex type product. So I'm a little bit old school when it comes to that, using maybe an old oil-based type product that will help lock that in to keep that tannin from bleeding through. However, there are latex products on the market, and we have a couple of them: Woodscape, Solid Stain, Duration, and Emerald, that will help lock that tannin in on the first coat. So when you're painting, you've got a little bit of bleed on there, you're painting it, all of a sudden it looks like it's bleeding through that first coat. But what that is it's actually locking that tannin in that coat. And then when you put a subsequent coat on top of that of Duration, Woodscape's Emerald, it does not come through. It actually will lock that in. So
you have to be patient, though. You have to just live with what looks like a stain that is remaining and wait for the next coat to cover it. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if you do, if it looks like it's severe, and you can tell if it's a severe case. I mean, it's all over the place. If you notice that it's a severe problem, then it may come through even on the second coat. So that's why we say, we do have a couple of products, an old oil-based primer in severe tannin cases, to use it, just in case. That's the just in case part.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard you say that on bare wood, especially, but slow dry oil primers are the more desirable product as opposed to quick dry. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. If you think about it, in a slower drying product, and I use my fingers a lot, so hopefully the viewers can see this. So when you put that oil based product on there, what you want that to do is you want it slowly to sink down into the pore of the wood, so you can see that product is really anchoring itself into that piece of wood. The slower the better, because it will actually penetrate deeper into that wood. Now, if you've got a fast drying product, then basically that fast drying product will dry right on the wood, which is not bad, don't get me wrong. But if it dries right on top of the wood, you don't get as good an anchor or adhesion as you would with that slow drying. So
similarly, we're seeing in the marketplace now these products described as paint and primers in one. How is that working, and what does that mean really? Does it mean you don't have to use a primer on surfaces that have not been previously painted?
Okay, on products that are not previously painted, what you need to look for is a product that, let's take wood for an example. And I just talked about Woodscapes, and I talked about Duration, and I've talked about Emerald. These are exterior products. Those products are designed specifically to go directly to a raw piece of wood. Some of these paint and primers aren't necessarily direct to raw wood. So some of these paint and primers can go directly to existing substrates. They can go to substrates, and we talked about like stain blocking.
Mm-hmm.
That if you've got some stains on the substrate, you can actually put that product on top of that stain without that stain bleeding through. So technically, that's kind of like the paint and primer in one, if you will. We were one of the first to come out with a true paint and primer in one with the duration going directly to a raw piece of wood without using a primer, and it's tenacious adhesion. Wow.
Are there compromises associated with using those products versus a traditional primer coat and a top coat?
Well, there's a rhyme and reason for everything, and typically what I would say is I would do specifically by job. If you have block, let's talk about block. Putting a paint and primer in one paint over top of block is not really a good idea.
You mean concrete block?
Yes, concrete block. If that concrete block has never been filled, it's raw concrete block. Typically, what I would tell you to do is use the appropriate primer, and that primer would be a block filler. So what you want to do is you want to fill the pore of that block so your subsequent coats, your paint and primer coat, when it goes on there, that it doesn't just really soak in and you see all of the pores and everything. And what it'll do, if you use the appropriate primer on the appropriate substrate, it'll help that top coat develop its natural sheen, color, durability, the scrubbability, the washability. So there are reasons why you really should prime, and there are reasons why you don't really need to prime. So it's just, like I said, it's kind of like a job-to-job basis. So like, in my case, with my basement, it already had that oil-based paint on there. I decided to put emerald matte directly but I did a test first to make sure we had good adhesion. Now, if I wouldn't have good adhesion, I would have used a product called Extreme Bond, and it's a bonding primer that would help not only adhere, to adhere to the oil-based paint, but my top coat to develop good adhesion, durability, and so forth. So primers are needed in some cases maybe not.
Interesting. I've heard that inorganic paint pigments are generally more durable than organic pigments. First, can you please tell us the difference between the two types of pigment, and is this true? What colors should folks stay away from for the longest lasting exterior paint job?
Okay, I'll try to make this easy because this is really a difficult topic. So I kind of look at organics as something that I want to say maybe like a plant base. So violets and quin red, those are more plant type based colorants, where an inorganic would come from like minerals and or metals. So example, red iron oxide or yellow iron oxide, those are oxides that are typically used inside or outside. The organics like a violet or a quin red are typically used interior, not exterior. Now, there are reds and yellows that are exterior use, higher performing type reds and yellows. But most often in formulations, you'll see the iron oxide, the red iron oxide, or the yellow iron oxide in those formulations for exterior use. As far as staying away from, typically the bright yellows, the bright reds, the real vibrant type purples and fuchsias and things like that, typically you're not going to see those used outside anyway. In most cases, you'll see lights and whites and mediums and browns and blues and things like that. But those really vibrant type colors, pretty limited in use.
If you were to use those on your siding, for example, though, you could expect that it would fade more quickly than something with an inorganic pigment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are there other trade-offs with using organic pigments versus inorganic?
Well, again, it depends on the substrate. It depends on the primer that's used or not. So in some cases, those organics, some of them, they don't take too kindly to alkalinity in the pH scale. So pH of 1 is an acid, the pH 13 is like salt, if you will, alkali. Um, so in some cases, those organics don't like that higher pH substrate. So you want to make sure that if you're using those type of products, that you would use a good, and I really mean good, alkali resistant type primer, so that alkali doesn't come through and attack your paint film and or your pigments.
Paint chemistry is so freaking cool. I'm sorry. How do you guys test new products, and do you have test facilities? Do you send new products out into the field for actual field trials?
We do actually. I'm part of that program as well. We have typically what happens is we listen to our customer, voice of the customer. They give us a problem that they have. Let's just say, and they say, hey, we need a paint that'll do X, Y, and Z. As a matter of fact, we talked about the Emerald Rain Refresh at IBIZ, and that was basically a voice of our customer. So what they said is, I need a paint that will do this. So we take that to our lab, and they create something, in quartz or little beakers and things like that. So then we go down and we'll actually paint it out and test it and look at it and run it through a battery of tests and go, okay, that's not too bad. Then what we'll do is we'll send that to our field technical product managers, and there's a number of them throughout the whole entire country. And they'll get a gallon or two or three, and then they'll play around with it, and they'll come back and tell us, good, bad, or ugly, whatever it may be. So then what we'll do is we'll kind of tweak that, formulate it up, and then we'll send out maybe 5 or 10 or 15, 20 gallons, whatever it might be, to those same field technical people. And they'll work with our customer. So they'll actually get a customer in on a project, and they'll set up kind of a blind test where they have this new product, and then they'll have the existing product, and they'll do a side-by-side testing of that product. And, if that field validation testing goes well, then what we'll do is we'll work through that process and go through our commercialization process. So everything, say, is a go vote. Everybody likes it and things are working well. It's a go vote. We'll go through commercialization. We'll start ramping up larger batches and do another, testing and then quality control to make sure that product is good. Of course, all the while, all these samples in the background are getting tested for weatherability and depending upon if it's inside or outside, scrubbability, washability, stability, is it stable in 100-degree temperature and so forth. So yeah, there is a number of steps through our validation process that we go through. And let's just say, we come back, the customer says, oh, it's too sticky, or we didn't like this or we didn't like that about it. Then that's kind of like a no vote. So we take that back to the lab, they tweak it again, and then we do go through that process over and over. So
interesting. So a lot of engineered materials and architectural millwork now come pre-primed. Is it safe to put a top coat directly on pre-primed material, or should you prime it again? Does it matter how long the factory primer has been exposed to the weather?
Oh boy, again, that's a thank you for asking that, because it plays right into my hand again. That prep. So I would, Pat, I would have to say it's by job basis. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's just say you've got planking or something that was manufactured, and then they primed it in the factory 6 months ago. So then they put it out in their yard, and it's in their yard for several months. And then they ship it on to a wholesaler, and then the wholesaler sells it to the home builder. Then the home builder, it gets shipped to his job site, and it's set there for a month or two or whatever. So the question would be is, how clean is that? Has it been out in the sun? Has the sun degraded, the UV degraded that primer? So it's kind of a job-to-job type basis. So if you're looking at that and you wipe your hand across that substrate and you get chalkiness off, or you get dirt, grease, grime, or contaminant off on your hand, then Rick said prep it. And that means we got to go back in and clean it up. And in some cases, we'd use the appropriate primer, whether it's a wood substrate, use a good primer for wood. If it is a cementitious type planking, then we would come in with something like a Lox-On conditioner and then go in with a top coat. And in some cases, we may not have to. It's perfectly fine. Going over top of that could be perfectly fine. It's a matter of a job to job basis.
And would you recommend testing of the substrate with the adhesion test, or yeah?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're questioning the primer, again, even by wiping your hand across it, if you really want to, doing a crosshatch or an X adhesion test, go for it. You bet.
Your company recently introduced an exterior paint that stays cleaner. We were just talking about this, and one that provides a much greater range of application temperatures. Can you tell me about these two products?
Well, as we talked at IBIS, this is, and I believe I took you over to the wall where we were doing the sampling
Yeah, you
of
were
the
making a
dirt
mess and then hosing it off.
I was having so much fun there. Yes, actually, we just launched Emerald Rain Refresh, and this is the one that had the dirt and everything. And so the big deal about this is as we talked and as I showed you, this is a self-cleaning, and it truly is a self-cleaning type product. And what I mean by self-cleaning is that it cleans by shedding that dirt and contaminant upon rain or water contact.
How's
And
that
as
work?
I know, it's like it's a miracle.
How does it work? What
You
do
were
you put
there.
in there?
Well, I can't tell you that. Those are trade secrets and things, so I can't tell you that. But we engineer these things with precision, and obviously, as I talked about our field validation, as I talked about our voice of our customers, this actually rose from the voice of the customer. We have a product called Lox-On Self-Cleaning Acrylic, and it was designed specifically for concrete and masonry substrates. Customers loved it, and it does what it says it does. It actually sheds dirt by rain or water. So we had customers come to us and say, well,
Put this in everything.
I paint houses. Those houses are not concrete. I need a product that will paint concrete. It'll paint masonry. It'll paint brick. It'll paint steel. It'll go on vinyl, or it'll go on wood or aluminum or galvanizing. So it's like, well, maybe let's take Emerald, our existing Emerald product, and see if we can take that self-cleaning formulation and add it to our Emerald. And as you saw at IBIS, we created the Emerald Rain Refresh with that self-cleaning technology. You put it on it's self-priming too, by the way. Did I tell you that? It is self-priming and very durable, awesome adhesion, just tenacious adhesion. So, and watershed, boy, I could just go on forever, Pat. But anyway, so what happens is you get a little dirt on that substrate, and that dirt actually can't penetrate into the pore of the coating. So that dirt actually will sit on the surface. And when the rain comes, and or a garden hose or pump up little sprayer with water, that water actually will bead off, and actually that bead will help wash that dirt right off the substrate. And if you remember, as you saw, that's great. Even a brand new painted house will
Gets
do
dirty.
that for a little while.
Yeah.
Well, it'll do it for a little while. But what happens at IBIS, what we also noticed is that those panels that we were continually putting that dirt and mud and yuck on the Emerald Rain Refresh, there was no problem. It kept beating up. But in a conventional coating, it would go for a little while, but then all of a sudden you would see that staining. And what was happening is that dirt would be pushed into the substrate, into the paint film, and it would actually start staining those conventional type products. So
what is the premium for that product versus the standard line that doesn't have the self-cleaning technology?
Pat, I really don't even know pricing. I haven't even seen pricing. All I deal with is specifying quality. And, when it comes to my own home, when somebody asks me about pricing, It doesn't matter to me. What I do is I want to make sure that I put the best product on the substrate so I don't have to do it again
Yeah.
because, I want to give people a quality product that I would use in my own home. If it's $5 more a gallon, it's worth it to me. You get what you pay for.
Hmm.
That is so important.
I think it's
Not
important to
only
remind people too that the cost of the paint or stain is very small and proportionate to the cost of a paint job, right? It's not
Pat,
much.
you are so right, and that is so important. If you're buying a gallon of paint and it's $25 a gallon, and you've got a gallon of paint that's $40 a gallon, minus sales and all that kind of stuff, which is better? Well, it depends. It really depends. If you've got a cheap quality that you're selling for $40 a gallon, you're going to notice. But with these higher quality emerald type products that are more expensive compared to cheaper products, you're putting more on the surface, you're getting more out of that coating, and it's your time. What is your time worth? Do you want to do one trip around the house or do you want to make two trips around the house? So that's some of the things that I do. My time is valuable.
Hmm.
And so when I do a project, I want to put a product on there that I can do it quickly, I can do it effectively, and that I will get durability out of that product for years to come. And I'm telling you, this Emerald Rain Refresh is by far is our finest architectural exterior coating to date.
Cool.
It's phenomenal.
Can you tell me about the one that you can apply in a much greater temperature range too?
Okay, so we launched Flex Temp. That is our newest product for exteriors. Well, both of these were exterior, by the way. And so what that product is about the temperature variations. So we have a product that'll go from 35 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit air, surface, and material temperature without changing anything to your application or without adding any type of additives to your product. So in conventional type paints, typically it's 50 to 90. That's your frame of temperatures. When you start swinging into greater temperatures, 110, 120, and all of a sudden the product starts getting thinner. The viscosity gets thinner. When you go down to the opposite way, when you get into 40 degrees, 30 degrees, and so forth, it starts getting more viscous, so it's getting thicker. But with Flex Temp, you don't have that variation from very thick type product to very thin type product. It actually stays in the same viscosity range from 35 to 120. So that means you're still getting flow and leveling that you would from 35 all the way up to 120 degrees.
That's incredible.
Excellent product, especially if you're in Arizona or you're up in Maine, depending upon date, time, and temperatures.
What do you find most interesting about paint chemistry or making and selling paint?
Uh, you know, I think the things that well, I don't. Well, I never really thought too much about that. Um, I think the best thing that I like. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it. I'm not necessarily a chemist, but what I do, I like to do the research. I like to put in the time to test our products. To test our products against our competition as well. So I do competitive aspects from Sherwin-Williams for our field. So what I like to do is I like to put the research in. I like to test our product up against someone else's product. I like to see those test numbers as far as washability and scratch resistance, things like that, what that product will actually do. So if I know what that product will do, then I can convey that to you. I can convey to you, my customer. I can convey that to all of the stores and the sales reps in the field so that when they talk to their customers, they've got this knowledge base, kind of back in the brain that they can pull up and say, oh, yeah, that emerald mat has great adhesion and yada, yada, yada. So I think that's the best part of it is that I'm actually doing the research, putting that time in to learn more about that product so I can speak intelligently about that product instead of just, stammering around and going, I don't know. And so many people do that. It's think about it. If you go into a store and a person is there and they go, oh yeah, that emerald product or that cashmere product or that flex temp product, I can tell you all about that. That gives them a level of confidence that they're buying from someone that really knows what they're talking about. And that puts me at ease. When I go in, look at lighting, and I'm talking to somebody about lighting, and they're going, I don't know. That doesn't put me at ease. But if I go in there and start talking about plumbing or whatever, it's like, you need this, 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 and this, and here's the reason why, then that puts me at ease as a customer, and I feel pleased about what I'm going to be doing and that it will work. I guess that's what I like about it.
Rick, thanks so much for being on the show. It is a pleasure talking to you as always.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Rick Watson for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody, and thanks for listening. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.